It's horrible. And yet I don't see any real outcry from all these human rights organizations. I see condemnation of the state of Arizona, but I don't see that outcry. And the fact is that every state, every government has a responsibility of securing its borders. John McCain and I, by the way, are going down again tomorrow. They've made great progress in San Diego. The crime rate has dropped dramatically over there. They've made great progress in Texas. Across the Arizona-Sonoran border, there is the toughest and the worst of all the drug cartels. It's called the Sinaloa cartel, and it's run by a guy named Chapo Guzman. Chapo Guzman, by the way, a few years ago, walked out of a Mexican prison. And we're talking about a $65 billion a year business. So, and at some point we've got to have a conversation in America about why we're creating all this demand for drugs too. And that's another part of this issue that we haven't talked about nearly enough. But, so we can secure the border. Don't think we can't. And one of the areas, besides getting the guard down there, besides building the fences, is we've learned a lot in Iraq about surveillance. And these UAVs do an incredible job. I can tell you they can surveil wide areas, and we can have response teams, particularly in those areas of Arizona, that it takes them a while to walk to get to a highway or to a populated area. And the Border Patrol's doing a great job. I was down there with the head of Northern Command a couple of weeks ago. We went to one of these forward operating bases, they call them. They live in a very spartan existence, 4 Border Patrol to a room. They work for 7 days, they get 4 days off, and they're doing a great job. And every one of them, I tell you, they can do the job if they get the assets and if they get the help that they need. So it's not as if this is an impossible task. So, by the way, I had lunch in the State Department with President Calderon when he was in town. In many ways, when he was in Washington. In many ways, I respect President Calderon. Look, it's a tough struggle that he's in. But I didn't like his criticism that he had to say about our law. And at the lunch, I said to him, I said, I'm sure you know what the #1 kidnapping capital of the world is. He said, yeah, Mexico City. I said, you know what #2 is? He said, no. I said, Phoenix, Arizona. Well, why in the world should Phoenix, Arizona be the #2 kidnapping capital in the world? That means that the federal government isn't doing its job. So, as you know, John Collin and I have a 10-point plan. We did get through the Armed Services Committee mandate for 6,000 guard troops being sent to the border. Don't think that the administration won't fight that every step of the way. They will. But we did get majority votes on the floor of the Senate on a number of the 10-point plan. And I think when you look at polling numbers, majority of the American people support what we're trying to do. In fact, there are legislative proposals in some of these states to do similar things to what we are doing here in Arizona. So these are tough times, and I really, one thing I do not understand, and I think I understand a lot, but one thing I do not understand is any citizen of Arizona or any elected representative that would call for a boycott. Why in the world someone would want to hurt our state if they're speaking in advocacy for our Hispanic citizens? 30% of our population is Hispanic. Why would they want to harm their citizens if that's what their advocacy is all about? It's disgraceful, and people who are elected officials do it, I think, should be thrown out of office. And so, so let me just mention one other issue with you very quickly, because our Guard and Reserve continues to do a magnificent job in Iraq and Afghanistan. Every 4th of July I go to Iraq and Afghanistan, and I'll be going with Joe Lieberman and Lindsey Graham again this 4th of July, and it's always an uplifting experience and a humbling experience to be around these brave young Americans. I'm worried about it. We have succeeded in Iraq. They'll have bumps in the road, but they're on the right track. In Afghanistan, I'm very worried because the president announced that we would be leaving the middle of 2011. We shouldn't leave until the job is done. We certainly shouldn't send the signal to the Taliban and others that we are leaving, because That's one of the reasons why you see Karzai acting sort of like he is, because he's beginning to try to accommodate to us leaving. But I just want to tell you a brief story on the flip side of immigration. In 2007, I was in Baghdad, and General Petraeus, who I think is the greatest military leader that I have ever known, is an amazing combination of charisma and intellect that I have never seen before, invited me to go to a 4th of July ceremony in the palace there at Baghdad, where 370 young Americans, soldiers, airmen, Navy, Marines, were re-enlisting to stay and fight. Their enlistment was over, they could go home, and they were re-enlisting to stay and fight in Iraq. And there was also a group of about 170 that had taken advantage of a program that we have, that if you are a green card holder, then and you join the military, you get an accelerated path to citizenship. Some of you are familiar with that. And anyway, there was 170 some that were supposed to be sworn in as citizens on that day as well. So we go in, there's probably 1,000 soldiers and airmen and Marine there. As I sat down, I looked at the front row, and there was 4 seats with boots on them. Those who had been killed in the previous 48 hours that were supposed to get their citizenship. I'll never forget that as long as I live. It's a wonderful thing to be a citizen, and people are literally willing to lay down their lives for the sake of becoming a citizen of this country. So it certainly, I hope, is a lesson to all of us of how blessed we all are to be citizens of this nation and live in the most beautiful state in America. So, any questions or comments or insults that you might have? Yes. There's a microphone right there.
I was going to yell.
Another work release program.
Senator McCain, my name is Kathleen Fitzpatrick. I have a 9-year-old daughter, and in her civics class at school, she was asked to identify a current leader and what leadership means to her. So I'm going to pose the same question to you, and can you choose just one leader living who is a great example of what embodies leadership?
You know, it's funny. I'm sure if I thought deeply about it, about living leaders, but right now I would probably, because I was just talking about it, David Petraeus. When he took over in Iraq, we were losing. We had lost in Iraq, and we had lost several thousand brave young Americans. And he turned it around. But the other thing that Petraeus did that's so impressive is now there's a whole generation of young Army and Marine officers that have been recruited and trained and intellectually driven by him, so that the leadership of the military today, in my view, particularly the Army and the Marine Corps, is really superb, because he has kind of inspired a generation of young officers, ranging from captains up to generals, that are really kind of his school. So I think he turned history around. If we had lost in Iraq and had to leave, the consequences of failure in Iraq, I think, would have had a serious domino effect in the region. So right now, I would say David Petraeus. By the way, in case you missed it, earlier this week, I was questioning him at the hearing, and he fainted. And I know I'm a tough questioner, but and what he